Do you think this is just a beautiful lake? Throw out your school textbooks. Baikal is a gigantic tectonic wound that behaves like a living organism. Today, you will hear 13 facts that unsettle even scientists. Make sure you watch to the end. You will learn how Baikal can wipe entire cities off the map, and why its legendary water may soon be unsafe to drink. Our list opens with a creature that looks like it flew in from another planet to colonize Siberia. Meet the Golomyanka. You have probably heard of the famous Baikal omul that is served in every restaurant. But Baikal's paradox is that its true ruler is not the omul at all. If you come to the lake and want to see it with your own eyes, it will not work. It does not swim in schools near the shore, and it does not bite a hook. It is a real ghost of Baikal, an invisible creature that controls the ecosystem while staying in the shadows. And honestly, running into it can shock an unprepared tourist. A real shock. Let us take a closer look. Imagine a fish where nature stripped away everything unnecessary. It has no scales at all. Its skin is completely bare and transparent, like the chastest glass. If you shine a flashlight beam at its head, you will not just see its outline. You will see its tiny heart beating and blood pulsing through its vessels. You can see its delicate spine and even what it managed to eat for lunch. Through this fish's tail, you could literally read a newspaper. In the water, it hovers, spreading huge pectoral fins like butterfly wings, and it shimmers with every color of the rainbow. But the main anomaly is not how it looks. It is what it is made of. It is not muscles and bones. It is a living, swimming clot of energy. This fish's body is 40% pure, high-quality fat. For comparison, it is fattier than the richest pork. Why would evolution create a slab of butter with fins in icy water? It is brilliant. It has no swim bladder, no little air balloon that helps ordinary fish avoid sinking. Instead, fat does the job. Because it is lighter than water, it gives the fish neutral buoyancy. That is why it can hover in the water at any depth, like an astronaut in zero gravity, without any effort at all. It often hangs in the water vertically, head up or head down, like a candle in a black abyss. This organism is a prisoner of extreme cold, and it feels comfortable only at around +4 degrees. But if the water warms even to +10, a temperature we would call icy for a swim, a critical moment arrives. It goes numb and stops functioning. And now, get ready for the most shocking fact, the one that blows your mind. What happens if you pull this fish out to the surface in summer? Imagine a storm throws it onto the shore, or you place it on your palm under direct sunlight. What will happen? It will not start gasping like a carp. It will vanish. It is physics. Under heat and sun, its fatty body starts melting at high speed. The fish literally melts before your eyes, like an ice cube, or a piece of butter on a hot pan. After a few hours, all that remains of a living creature is an oily smear, little puddles, and a paper-thin skeleton. That is why, in the old days, locals used stormcast fish not as food, because there is nothing to eat, but as lamp fuel or a healing ointment. But that is not all. It also has a unique way of reproducing. Most fish lay eggs, right? But in Baikal's harsh conditions, eggs might not survive. So Manka went all in. It is the only fish in our latitudes that gives birth to live larvae. And it does it on a cosmic scale. One female can produce up to 3,000 tiny copies of herself. And lastly, a number that will make you rethink the scale of this creature. Manka is an invisible one. We do not see her. But scientists calculated that if you put all Baikal fish on one set of scales, all the huge sturgeon, 1,000 tons of omul, pike, and then put all the Golomyankas on the other side, the Golomyankas would outweigh them. Their biomass makes up 70% of all fish in the lake. There are 1 billion of them. It is a gigantic, invisible army of ghosts living in eternal darkness. We climb out of the icy depths onto land. But do not think Baikal's stranity end there. If you are used to walking through a forest and seeing trees growing normally out of the ground, your brain might glitch a little here. In 12th place in our countdown is a phenomenon that looks like someone used magic. Or like we stepped onto the set of The Lord of the Rings. Remember those giant living trees that could move? On Baikal, that is not fantasy. It is real. Here there are unique walking trees. or, as scientists call them, stilt root trees. To see this wonder of nature, we need to go to one of the most beautiful and hard-to-reach places, Peshanaya Bay on Lake Baikal. Tourists often call it the Siberian Riviera for its white sand and turquoise water. But once you step away from the beach and the forest edge, the idyll turns into something much more real. You will see huge Vecovy pines and larches that seem to hang in the air. Their roots are not hidden in the ground like normal plants. They are exposed and lifted above the surface to a height of 2 and sometimes 3 meters. That is taller than a person. You can literally walk under a tree, standing at full height between its roots, as if under an arch or inside a hut. The sight, honestly, is a bit creepy. From far away, it looks like the forest has come alive. The roots resemble giant octopus tentacles, or the legs of a spider that decided to rise onto its toes and step over the dunes to get closer to the water. It feels like these pines are slowly walking toward the lake right now, moving their wooden limbs. But why did nature go crazy here? Who dug the soil out from under giants that weigh several tons? The answer lies in Baikal's own harsh character. The thing is, the soil in this bay is sand, and Baikal's winds are a terrifying force of their own, which we will talk about later. Constant storm winds and waves, decade after decade, centimeter by centimeter, undercut and wash the soil out from under the trees. For any ordinary tree, that would be the end. After losing support, it would collapse and die. But Baikal pines and larches are real fighters, masters of survival. They refuse to give up. As the ground slips away from under them, they do not fall. Instead, they grow roots deeper and wider, clinging to what remains of the soil with incredible stubbornness. The trunk stays in place, while the roots become more and more exposed, turning into those stilt-like legs. For years, the tree balances on the tips of its fingers, holding tons of weight over empty space. It looks like a tragedy, or a feat frozen in time. Each such tree is a monument to the fight for life. Some of them stand like this for centuries, resisting gravity and hurricanes. Tourists love taking photos here, climbing right into the root system. But few people think about the fact that, in essence, we are watching a slow agony of the forest, stretched over 100 years. Sadly, this unique natural monument is disappearing. Gravity wins sooner or later. The famous pines that appeared on Soviet postcards from the 1980s have already fallen. Their roots could not hold on, and the sand sank too deep. In their place, nature is trying to create new walkers, but the process is very slow. So if you want to see trees that can walk, you should hurry. Baikal is merciless, even to those who live on its shores. But if trees here are forced to adapt by standing on tiptoe, then the next animal on our list pulled off an even more incredible feat. It should not be here at all. And now, attention. We are coming to the cutest, and at the same time, the most inexplicable resident of the lake. If you have ever seen a Baikal souvenir, in 90% of them, you will see the Baikal seal. What could be mysterious about that? A seal swims around, flaps its flippers, and makes eyes at tourists. Everyone melts. Any biologist looking at the Baikal seal should grab their head and say, "This can't be real," because the very existence of this animal in Baikal is a geographic and biological paradox that science has been trying to solve for more than a century. Let's use logic. What are seals? They are marine animals. Their home is the salty oceans, the ice of the Arctic, or Antarctica. Now look at the map. Baikal sits in the very center of the gigantic Asian continent. The nearest warm ocean is 1,000 kilometers from here. The cold Arctic Ocean is more than 3,000 kilometers away, across impassable taiga forests, mountains, and steppe. So here's the $1 million question. How did a marine animal that moves on land like a sack of potatoes end up in a closed, isolated freshwater lake? What, in the middle of Siberia, did it teleport in or fly here on a plane? Official science points to the Ice Age. Supposedly, 1,000 years ago, there was a system of giant rivers connecting the Arctic Ocean and Baikal. And the ancestors of the Baikal seal, polar seals, swam south along those rivers, escaping the advancing ice. It sounds convincing. Until you think about it, they would have had to swim against the current of powerful ancient rivers. Imagine a seal climbing rapids and waterfalls, swimming 3,000 kilometers upstream like a salmon going to spawn. That is a feat bordering on fantasy. There is another version, more legendary, but no less popular among locals. Old-timers believe Baikal is connected to the Arctic Ocean by a gigantic underground tunnel through which water and animals can circulate. Of course, geologists laugh at this, but the fact remains a fact. The seal is here, and it is thriving. Completely cut off from its marine relatives. After 1,000 years of isolation, the seal has turned into a real mutant. In the best sense of the word, it has rebuilt its entire body for fresh water and Baikal conditions. For example, look at its eyes. They are huge, black, and bottomless. Why? Because Baikal is deep, and the seal hunts at depths of up to 300 meters, where eternal darkness reigns, and it needs the vision of a night sniper. By the way, about sleep. Did you know the Baikal seal can sleep underwater? But not just sleep. If it runs low on air, it surfaces without waking up, takes a breath, and dives back down. It works like autopilot. What is more, its blood contains many times more hemoglobin than ours. That lets it hold its breath for 40 to 60 minutes. Imagine you dove in, watched an episode of your favorite show, and only then came up for air. For the Baikal seal, that is normal. But the most astonishing superpower of the Baikal seal is control over childbirth. It sounds like science fiction, but female seals can put pregnancy on pause. If a year is lean or conditions are too harsh, the mother's body can simply freeze the embryo's development. The embryo stops growing and enters suspended animation, waiting for better times. Pregnancy can last not 9 months, but 11 or more, until the female decides it is time. Now it is safe. She can give birth. This is a unique survival mechanism that is almost never found in other mammals. The Baikal seal is not just a symbol. The lake is a living monument to an unbelievable will to live. It crossed 1,000 kilometers, changed its biology, and learned to control its own body to become Baikal's queen. It is an outsider here, an alien from the ocean that made this lake its home. But if the Baikal seal managed to come to terms with Baikal, humans do not always manage that. The lake can be cruel, and it has a weapon that even modern technology cannot defeat. We say goodbye to the cute seals and move on to what makes Baikal one of the most dangerous bodies of water on the planet. If you think the main threat on the water is depth or sharks, which do not exist here, you are wrong. The main enemy here is invisible, the air. In 10th place in our ranking is a natural phenomenon that locals mention in a whisper with caution. Sarma is not just a wind. It is a real natural wind tunnel that can turn a calm boat ride into an icy hell in minutes. Let's break down how it works, because the physics here is terrifying. Picture Baikal's geography. The lake is surrounded by high mountains. In the north, there is the Arma River Valley, which reaches the lake through a narrow gorge. That gorge works like the giant nozzle of a jet engine, or the neck of a bottle. In winter and autumn, cold, heavy Arctic air gathers behind the mountains on a plateau. It builds up there like water behind a dam, gaining enormous mass and pressure. And at one moment, that dam breaks. 1 million tons of icy air rush down toward the lake. Squeeze through a narrowing gorge. The air accelerates to insane speeds. At the mouth of the gorge, the wind reaches 40 to 50 meters per second, and in gusts, 60 meters per second. So you understand, a hurricane is defined as wind at 30 meters per second. 40 is a double hurricane. This flow has such monstrous power that it rips roofs off houses, tears up Vekovi trees by the roots, and, as local legends say, can lift a cow into the air and carry it out onto the open lake. But the scariest thing about Sarma is how sudden it is. Imagine you are on a boat. The sun is shining, the sky is perfectly clear, the water is calm, nothing suggests trouble. But an experienced captain looks at the mountains and suddenly swings the vessel toward shore. Why? Because he saw the gates. That is what they call the ominous, mushroom-shaped clouds that appear over the gorge a couple of hours before the strike. If a gap appears between the mountain peaks and the clouds, the gates have opened. You have very little time to escape. When it hits the water, it creates an effect sailors call white hell. The wind does not just raise waves, it tears off their crests and turns them into water dust. Visibility drops to 0. But the main danger is not the rough ride. It is icing. Remember, Arma brings icy air, and the temperature drops sharply. Water spray hitting the ship freezes instantly. Every drop turns sticky. In minutes, the vessel is покрывается with a thick lead crust. Rails, masts, the wheelhouse, everything becomes encased in a heavy lead armor. The ship gets heavier, and with every second, the center of gravity shifts. The vessel loses control, lists, and capsizes. Baikal's history has tragic chapters tied to this wind. The most famous disaster happened in the autumn of one year. A huge tugboat called Potapov, a former barge hauler, was caught by the Uter. The storm itself tossed the convoy like splinters. People tried to hack away the growing ice with axes to lighten the vessel. But the storm was faster. That is not the only story. Fishing boats and tourist cutters, Arma spares no one who ignored the gate's warning. The sound of this wind cannot be confused with anything. Witnesses say it does not whistle. It thunders. It sounds like the roar of a jet aircraft in flight, or a freight train rushing straight at you. Today, captains have accurate weather forecasts and powerful engines. But even in 2025, when storm warnings are issued, navigation in the area of the small sea comes to a complete stop. No one wants to play roulette with a wind that can bend iron like cardboard. Admit it, who among you did not dream of finding treasure as a kid? A pirate chest, a map with an X. Well, Baikal has its own treasure island. Only here, instead of sand, there is icy water, and instead of a chest, an entire train of railroad cars. This is not a legend and not a fairy tale for tourists. It is a real historical fact that has turned into a detective story lasting 100 years. The story sounds like a script for a Hollywood blockbuster. In the middle of the Civil War, Admiral Kolchak, retreating east, took with him a huge part of the state treasury. These were not papers, but real gold, bars, coins, jewelry, hundreds of tons of precious metal, worth, by today's estimates, about $1 billion. Where did it go? Some of it was, of course, looted, and some was taken abroad. But documents and eyewitness accounts stubbornly insist that a significant part of the cargo disappeared imminent here, on the shores of Baikal. There are two main versions of how the lake swallowed the treasury. The first is chilling. In the winter, the Moroz was around -40. People, horses, and heavy wagons loaded with crates froze right as they moved. 1,000 figures were left standing on the ice like frozen statues. And when the ice melted in spring, Baikal simply took everything that was on the surface down into its depths. The second version is man-made, and it seems more plausible to search teams. The gold was being carried along a railway, laid right along the edge of cliffs above the lake. A rockslide or sabotage? The train was derailed. Heavy cars packed with crates of bars fell from the height and went under in a place where the depth begins almost right next to the shore. You will ask, if we know where it happened, why has it still not been recovered? It is the 21st century. And this is where it gets most interesting. Baikal. In 2008 and 2009, a scientific expedition called Mirs on Baikal worked on the lake. These are the same legendary Mir deep-sea submersibles that filmed the Titanic and dived to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. Serious scientists, serious equipment. Officially, they studied flora and fauna, but everyone knew they were looking for gold. And do you know what they found? Near Cape Tolstey, at a depth of several hundred meters, the bathyscaphe pilots saw twisted, mangled metal structures on the bottom, very similar to the remains of Civil War-era railroad cars. And a little later, among the silt and stones, the searchlights picked out strange objects with a telltale shine in the headlights. One of the pilots said they even tried to lift an artifact with the manipulator. But the bottom of Baikal is a treacherous trap. It is not solid ground, but a meter-thick layer of loose silt that works like quicksand. As soon as Mir tried to grab the object, a cloud of mutt rose, visibility dropped to zero, and the slope of an underwater canyon began to crumble. They decided not to risk the unique submersibles and people for the sake of bars. In 2010, they found another fragment that looked like a gold bar wedged in the rocks. But they could not get it out again. The lake. Look, but do not touch. Imagine that somewhere down there, in total darkness and cold, under pressure that would crush a person to pulp, lie mountains of gold. They are covered in silt, Among the wreckage of old trains and bones, it is a treasure you could spot from the Canary Islands, but it is out of reach. Kolchak's gold has become part of the lake itself. Mystics say Baikal charges an entry fee, but never returns what falls into its waters. Skeptics claim that lifting a cargo from that depth and that terrain costs more than the gold itself. Either way, this ghostly train still lies on the bottom. And every time a train passes by Baikal, passengers look into the dark water and think, could it be that right under me, right now, lies 1 billion? You have all seen these photos. A boat seems to hover in midair, and under it you can see stones at a depth of 40 meters. Tourists come here, scoop water with a cup right from the side of a boat, and drink it, amazed by the taste. So clean, like a tear. But have you ever thought about why it is so clean? Where does all the grass, dead fish, algae, and everything else that gets into the lake go? The answer will shock you. Baikal is not a sterile pool. It is a gigantic bioreactor. And the water's clarity is the work of a nojabillion strong army of creatures that operate like the most efficient and ruthless mass grinder in nature. Meet the gammarids, or as locals call them, bokoplavi. At first glance, nothing scary. Small crustaceans that look like shrimp or woodlice, ranging from a couple of millimeters to several centimeters. But in Baikal, there are more than 350 species of them. It is a unique explosion of evolution. There are even giant forms reaching 10 to 12 centimeters. They are everywhere. Under every stone, in every crack, on every sponge. Their biomass is enormous. Why did we call them cannibals? Of course, they do not hunt living swimmers like piranhas in horror movies. As long as you are moving, you are safe. But as soon as any organics, whether a dead fish, a drowned bird, or, sadly, a human, stops showing signs of life and sinks to the bottom, the feast begins. Gammarids are perfect scavengers. They have an incredible sense of smell. The moment the smell of organic matter appears in the water, 1,000 of these little monsters crawl in from all around. They blanket the object in a solid carpet. It is not a sight for the faint-hearted. Imagine a living mass that boils and moves, methodically unичтожая soft tissues. Local fishermen know this better than anyone. There is a grim rule. If you set nets overnight and fish gets caught, you must check them as early as possible. If you leave the catch in the water for a couple of days, then when you pull the net, you will find only perfectly clean white fish skeletons. The flesh will be eaten completely, neatly, down to the last bone. No surgeon works as cleanly as these crustaceans. And now for the darkest part. Baikal is a harsh lake. Tragedies happen here often. Storms, icy water, that same wind, sarma. People sometimes drown in ordinary cold lakes, where a temperature of +4 degrees can hold for months. The refrigerator effect works, but not on Baikal. Rescuers and divers who work here tell things that make your blood run cold. If a body has lain on the bottom for even a week, often there is simply nothing left to bring up to the surface. Gammarids get under wetsuits, chew through thick clothing, and crawl into the tiniest gaps. They process a human body at a frightening speed. That is why Baikal is often called a bottomless lake. In a figurative sense, it rarely returns those it has taken. It simply dissolves them into itself. And that is where the main irony lies. That same crystal clear water we drink and take pride in has passed through the digestive system of these creatures. We drink the result of their work. Gammarids, together with microscopic ochok and paishura, filter all of Baikal's water several times a year. They are the lake's sanitars. Without them, Baikal would bloom and turn into a swamp within a couple of years. So the next time you stand on the shore and admire the water's transparency, remember, this beauty is paid for by the non-stop work of 1 billion little jaws that, right now, down there, in the depths, are finishing off someone's unlucky dinner, or a victim of the storm. Nature is pragmatic. In Baikal, nothing goes to waste. Looking at the calm surface on a sunny day, it is hard to believe that hundreds of sunken ships could be lying beneath your boat's keel. From old wooden merchant boats from the era of Siberia's settlement to modern steel passenger ships and Soviet-era research vessels, Baikal is a treacherous trap that has been collecting its tribute for centuries. Why do ships sink here? After all, this is not the ocean. There are no tsunamis here. Wrong. Experienced captains never call Baikal a lake, only a sea. And this sea has a nasty temper. Storms here do not arrive on a schedule. They strike suddenly. Baikal's waves have a special steep shape. They are shorter and higher than ocean waves and can reach 4 to 6 meters in height. For a small vessel, getting caught in that kind of washing machine drum is a death sentence. The ship barely has time to rise onto a crest before the next wave crashes over it. But the most surprising thing about Baikal shipwrecks is not how they sink, but what happens to them afterward. In a normal sea, saltwater and marine worms quickly destroy a wooden ship in a few decades. Metal gets eaten away by rust. But Baikal is a gigantic natural refrigerator, a preserver. The water here is fresh, with almost no salts. At depth, there is eternal darkness and a constant temperature of about 3 to 4 degrees above zero. And the deeper layers hold less oxygen than the surface. These are ideal conditions for preservation that can last almost forever. Divers who dare to descend to sunken objects tell stories that feel almost mystical. You drop into a black abyss with a flashlight. The beam catches a mast in the dark, and you see a ship that looks like it sank yesterday, even though 100 years have passed. The wooden sides are intact. The painted name is still readable, and the wheel is still in place. In the cabins, you can find dishes, personal belongings of the crew, and cargo. They are real-time capsules. Some ships stand on the bottom, perfectly upright on their keels, as if they are still sailing, just in a different underwater world. The masts point upward, and the rigging is pulled taut by the current. It is the kind of sight that makes your skin crawl. It feels like the wheelhouse door is about to open, and the captain will step out. An entire fleet lies on Baikal's bottom. The steamboat Yakov rests here, sunk in the early 20th century. There are tugboats and barges that once carried timber and fish. There are even more modern Yaroslavets boats that could not withstand a storm. But ships are only part of the collection. Baikal's bottom is littered with cars. In winter, temporary ice roads are laid across the lake. It is the shortest route between villages. But Baikal's ice is treacherous. You will hear about this in the next point. Cracks, pressure ridges, places where the ice is thin because of underwater springs, and a car goes under in seconds. Down there lie vehicles from the Ulyanovsk automobile plant, cargo trucks, Gorky automobile plant trucks, Kama automobile plant trucks, and modern sport utility vehicles. Drivers who were lucky enough to survive say the car sinks nose first, and the headlights keep shining from the depths for a long time, until the battery dies. It is a chilling light show under the ice. Some divers call Baikal the Russian Bermuda Triangle. Of course, there is no mysticism here, only harsh physics and human carelessness. But the concentration of machinery per square kilometer of bottom here is among the highest in the world. For freshwater bodies, that is. Now, with modern cold weather equipment and navigation, there are fewer wrecks, but the lake is unpredictable. Every year, it takes new machines, and if a ship goes down into the depths, it will stay there forever. Lifting anything from Baikal's kilometer-deep abyss is practically impossible and astronomically expensive. So this underwater fleet will stand there for eternity, guarding the silence. A lake in darkness. Imagine astronauts looking through a porthole at Winter Baikal, a vast white field locked in ice. And suddenly, in that snowy emptiness, they see something that makes them grab their cameras. Perfectly even dark circles. These are not small patterns. They are giant geometric shapes, 5 to 7 kilometers across, and sometimes 10 kilometers. They are so huge and so symmetrical that from below, from the ice surface, you simply cannot grasp them. You can stand in the center of such a circle and not even realize it. When the first images hit the internet, conspiracy theorists around the world howled with delight. These are landing marks of giant unidentified flying objects. This is an underwater alien base. Warming up the engines. Crop circles were just practice. Now they draw on the ice. It really did look suspicious. Nature rarely creates perfect geometry on that scale. But the truth turned out to be far scarier and far more ordinary than a visit from aliens. Scientists began studying these rings and found out they are a deadly trap created by the lake's own physics. The mechanism behind these rings resembles a giant stovetop burner. From Baikal's bottom, and we remember it is a kilometer deep, powerful streams of warm gas, methane, or simply warm underwater currents rise up. These streams rush upward toward the surface. But the water in the lake does not stand still because of Earth's rotation. Yes, a twisting force works here, like in a cyclone. This rising stream begins to spin into a spiral. Giant underwater vortices form. As the warm water rotates, it melts the ice from below, shaving it with circular motion. As a result, the ice in that spot becomes critically thin, and that is where real horror begins for anyone on the surface. Winter Baikal is not a desert. Official roads are laid across the ice. Winter roads. Cars drive there. Tourist vans and fishermen's jeeps. The ice thickness on Baikal usually reaches 1 meter to 1.5 meters. That is reliable armor that could even hold a tank. Drivers are used to trusting the ice. Now imagine you are driving a jeep. All around you is white, solid ice. You are calm. And then, with no warning at all, you enter the zone of such a ring. Visually, the ice can look almost the same, maybe a bit darker, as if it is wet. But here its thickness is no longer 1 meter. It is only 10 to 20 centimeters. Or worse, it is no longer solid, but slush soaked with water. A vehicle moving at speed hits this trap. The ice does not crack as a warning. It simply crumbles to dust under the wheels. The car drops into the black abyss instantly. There is almost no chance to get out of a car that falls into icy water a kilometer from shore. The most treacherous thing about these rings is their unpredictability. They appear in different places. Today the ring is here. Next year, 50 kilometers farther south, and you cannot guess where. That is why Baikal is now monitored continuously from space. Satellites scan the surface every day, and as soon as specialists see a dark circle in the images, the coordinates are urgently sent to the Ministry of Emergency Situations to close the area to traffic. This phenomenon proves that beneath the lake's icy armor, a turbulent hidden life is going on. Baikal breathes, and its breath can be fatal for those who are in the wrong place at the wrong time. An ecological disaster happening right under our noses. But one few people speak about seriously is a war between two organisms, in which humanity, unfortunately, is playing on the side of evil. To understand the scale of the tragedy, we first need to meet the main hero that makes Baikal's water the way we love it. It is the Baikal sponge. If you dive with scuba gear, you will see astonishing bright green branches and thickets on the bottom, like sea corals. Some of them grow up to 1 meter tall. These are not plants. They are filter-feeding animals. Sponges are the lungs and kidneys of the lake. They constantly pump tons of water through themselves, pulling out suspended particles, bacteria, and organic matter. It is thanks to them and to those tiny organisms we talked about earlier that the water stays clear, down to 40 meters. They are unique endemic creatures that live only here. But a few years ago, divers started noticing a frightening scene. The green coral-like gardens began to fall ill. The sponges lose their color, turn dirty white, get covered in slime, and literally rot while still alive. The tissues die off, leaving only a bare skeleton. Science calls this necrosis, but in essence it is the mass death of the planet's natural filter. So who is the killer? Meet Spirogyra. The name sounds beautiful, but it looks disgusting. It is a filamentous alga that used to be almost non-existent in Baikal. It does not belong here. It loves warm, stagnant swamps, but now it is the boss here, and it looks like black or dark green cotton. It spreads at a monstrous speed, covering the bottom with a dense carpet. It suffocates everything alive. Sponges plastered with this slime cannot filter water, cannot get oxygen and light, and eventually die. Fish have nowhere to lay eggs because the clean rocky bottom turns into a rotting dump. But the creepiest sight awaits tourists on the shore. In some popular places, for example around Listvianka or in the north of Baikal, storms throw tons of this rotting biomass onto the beach. The beaches turn into black ridges of slime that smell like rotten eggs and decay. Imagine you came to the sacred sea to breathe fresh air, and you have to pinch your nose because the shore looks like a latrine pit. Where did this monster come from? The answer is unpleasant. We did. We fed it. It loves phosphorus and nitrogen. That is its favorite fertilizer, and it grows on it like crazy. And where does phosphorus come from in Baikal? From our laundry detergents, dish soap, and sewage. For decades, hundreds of tourist bases, hotels, and settlements along the shore have been dumping wastewater into the ground or straight into the water. Cheap detergents contain phosphates. Treatment facilities often simply cannot cope, or they do not exist at all. In essence, every time a tourist washes a towel with a cheap product, they send a food package to Spiragyra. With our own hands, we fertilize the lake, turning the greatest reservoir of drinking water into an ordinary blooming swamp. Scientists warn that if the sponges disappear, Baikal will stop cleaning itself. The water will become cloudy, toxic, and unfit to drink. It will no longer be Baikal, just a giant puddle. A real battle is happening right now. Volunteers clean the shores. Scientists look for ways to treat the sponges. And environmental activists demand a ban on phosphates and detergents in the region. But first, while it is still advancing, imagine you are standing on the ice of winter Baikal. All around is ringing silence, an endless snowy desert, and mountains. On the horizon, it feels like there is not a soul here, but that is an illusion. Right under your feet, at a depth of more than a kilometer, in pitch black darkness, a giant city of the future is at work. It is not a secret military base and not a bunker for the apocalypse. It is one of the biggest and most expensive scientific instruments on the planet. The Baikal Deepwater Neutrino Telescope. Baikal. Sounds strange, right? An underwater telescope. We are used to telescopes standing on mountaintops and looking at the sky. Why put it underwater, and under the ice at that? Because this telescope does not catch starlight. It hunts ghosts. Neutrinos are the most mysterious elementary particles in the universe. They are born in the depths of black holes, in supernova explosions, and in the cores of distant galaxies. These particles have a superpower. They pass through matter without noticing it. Right now, while you are reading this, 1 trillion neutrinos are flying through your body, and you do not feel a thing. They pass through Earth straight through, like a bullet through butter. Catching such a particle is unbelievably hard. For that, you need a trap on a planetary scale. And Baikal became the perfect place for it. Scientists use the water column of Baikal as a giant filter and a lens at the same time. Long cable garlands are lowered to the lakebed. On each garland hang hundreds of transparent glass spheres about the size of a soccer ball. Inside each sphere, at the top, is ultra-sensitive electronics. It looks like a set from a big-budget film. In the black abyss, in total silence, glowing clusters of eyes hang there, waiting for a signal. How does it work? When a neutrino, after flying through space and through the thickness of the Earth, accidentally collides with a molecule of Baikal water, a tiny flash of bluish light appears. Vavilov-Cherenkov radiation. That is the flash the glass spheres must detect in total darkness. Baikal was not chosen by chance. First, the water here is amazingly clear. Second, it is deep. And third, Baikal's winter ice is the perfect assembly platform. Scientists do not need ships. They simply drive trucks onto the ice, cut holes, and lower the equipment down. This telescope is, in essence, an eye that looks not up, but down. It looks through the Earth to see what is happening on the other end of the universe. Thanks to Baikal, we can learn what was happening 1 billion years ago in distant galaxies. The scale is staggering. The volume of this telescope is already measured in cubic kilometers of water. It is the largest installation in the Northern Hemisphere, and it keeps growing. Every winter, expeditions add new clusters. So, Baikal is not just a lake. It is a giant scientific instrument built into the planet. It is a place where an icy abyss helps unravel the fiery secrets of space. Imagine the scene. You are standing on the winter ice of Baikal. All around is snow and biting cold. You take an ice pick, chip away, and lift a piece of ice from the bottom of a shallow hole, then bring a lit match to it. And the ice flares up. It burns with a bright, even flame, like a torch. Even though water keeps dripping off it, this is not a trick and not special effects. It is burning ice, or, in scientific terms, gas hydrates. What are gas hydrates? They are a unique compound of methane and water. Under enormous pressure, under a thick water column, and at low temperatures, the gas becomes locked into the crystal lattice of ice. You get a solid substance that looks like packed snow or dirty ice, and when it warms up, it breaks down into water and a huge amount of gas. 1 cubic meter of such ice contains about 160 cubic meters of pure methane. Baikal is the only freshwater lake in the world with hydrate deposits. And these are not just deposits. The lake bed is literally covered with this substance. By the most conservative scientific estimates, about 1 trillion cubic meters of gas are stored there. That is more than the reserves of many countries. It seems like we should be happy. Future fuel. Just take it and pump it. But scientists look at it with trevoga. Why is it dangerous? Because Baikal is a seismically active zone, which we will talk about next. And the planet's climate is changing. Global warming could play a cruel trick if the temperature of the bottom water rises by just a couple of degrees, or if a strong tectonic shift happens. This sleeping genie will burst out of the bottle. Imagine a massive gas release from the bottom. 1 million methane bubbles rush toward the surface. And then the nightmare begins for any ship that happens to be in that area. You've probably heard about the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. One of the main scientific theories for ships disappearing there is methane release. The physics is simple and deadly. When water becomes saturated with a huge amount of gas bubbles, its density drops sharply. It turns into soda. In that kind of water, Archimedes' principle stops working the way we're used to. A ship that was floating confidently a second ago suddenly becomes heavier than this water gas mixture. The vessel simply drops into an air hole. It goes down like a stone, instantly, without even managing to send a distress signal. The crew won't even understand what happened. The sea just opens up under them. Scientists suspect that some mysterious disappearances of ships on Baikal in the past could have been caused by local gas releases. But dangers to ships are nothing compared to the climate bomb. Methane is a greenhouse gas that is dozens of times more aggressive than carbon dioxide, CO2. If Baikal boils and releases these reserves into the atmosphere, it can accelerate global warming at catastrophic rates in the region. Right now, mud volcanoes are working on the lake bed. Satellites regularly record those same rings on the ice we talked about. They are traces of gas release. The lake is threatening. For now, it's happening slowly, but the hydrate deposits are so enormous that Baikal is essentially sitting on a powder keg, and the fuse is in the hands of unpredictable nature. This place teaches us that beneath the mask of a calm water surface, something colossal can be hiding. Energy that lies dormant. Imagine you live in a beautiful, fertile steppe. You have a home, a household, livestock. The ground under your feet seems reliable and eternal. You go to sleep and make plans for tomorrow. And in the morning, you wake up in the middle of a lake. Your home is gone, and over the place where cows used to graze, waves are splashing and fish are swimming. It sounds like nonsense, or a scene from a 2012-style disaster movie. But for the people living on Baikal's shores, this is a real story that happened on New Year's Eve. It happened on the eve of 1862. The residents of the Tsagan Steppe, in the Selenga River Delta, were preparing to celebrate the new year. Nothing hinted at disaster, but nature decided to launch its own fireworks, terrifying and merciless. It started with an underground rumble that grew louder, like an approaching freight train, and then the earth literally vanished from under people's feet. The odor was of monstrous force. By modern estimates, about 10 points at the epicenter, and in cities hundreds of kilometers away, in Irkutsk, church bells rang on their own, and stone stoves crumbled to pieces. The ice on Baikal cracked with a deafening roar. But the worst was happening in the steppe. The earth's crust split open. Eyewitnesses recalled fountains of warm water mixed with mud and silt bursting from cracks in the ground. The water rose rapidly. In panic, people grabbed their children and whatever valuables they could and ran to higher ground. Those who didn't make it in time escaped onto the roofs of their yurts and houses, which floated in icy slush. In a single day, a huge piece of land, about 200 square kilometers, simply collapsed. It sank along a tectonic fault, and Baikal's waters instantly filled the void. 5 Buryat Ulis settlements disappeared from the face of the earth forever. More than 1,000 people were left without shelter. The disaster took 1,000 head of livestock and all their property. At dawn, when the sun rose, the survivors saw a Strashna picture. Where there had been steppe yesterday, where houses stood and herds grazed, there was now a new bay of Baikal. The locals gave it a simple and chilling name, the Provol Bay. Today, it's a beautiful place, popular with fishermen and tourists. The depth there is small, and the water warms up well. But if you're living there on a boat, Just think about it. Right beneath you, under a layer of silt, lie the remains of houses, fences, and household items. It's a real Baikal Atlantis, flooded in a single night. Why is this point in second place? Because this isn't a story from the distant past. It's a reminder of where we are. Baikal is one of the most seismically active zones on the planet. The lake shakes constantly. Seismologists record up to 2,000 earthquakes a year here. Most of them we don't feel. But every 10 to 12 years, there are noticeable jolts that make chandeliers sway and walls crack. And once a century, Baikal truly wakes up, like it did during the Tsagan Proval. Scientists say it plainly. A repeat of the catastrophe is inevitable. We don't know when, tomorrow, or in 50 years, but the lake bed will move again. The tectonic plates here are alive. They constantly shift and build up stress. And when that spring snaps, the coastline map will change again. We're used to calling Baikal a lake, but from the perspective of big geology, that's a lie. Baikal isn't a lake, it's the embryo of an ocean. Look at the map of Russia. It seems like Eurasia is one solid block of land that will last forever. But that's an illusion. Right now, at this very second, under the waters of Baikal, a planet-scale process is happening. The continent is being torn apart. This is called the Baikal Rift Zone. One part of Siberia sits on the massive Eurasian tectonic plate, and another, Transbaikalia, Primorye, part of China, lies on the so-called Amur plate. And these two plates have a conflict. They're moving away from each other. The speed of this divorce seems ridiculous, about 2 centimeters per year. Someone will say, nonsense, my nails grow faster. But on a planetary scale, these are insane speeds. It's 1 million tons of rock that every second grind, fracture, and creep, triggering those 2,000 earthquakes a year we talked about. Baikal's shores are literally drifting apart. The lake gets wider every year. Scientists at the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences have already built a model of the future. The forecast sounds like a sentence for today's world map. In 21 million years, the bridge will finally rupture completely. The waters of the Arctic Ocean will rush into this rift. There will be no Baikal. In its place, a new ocean will appear, separating Siberia from the Far East. Eurasia will split into 2 independent continents, Irkutsk and Ulan-Ude. If they still exist, they'll end up on the shores of different continents, separated by salty water. Like New York and London, we are unique witnesses. We live in an era when a new ocean is being born before our eyes. Usually, this process is hidden deep underwater, like in the Atlantic. But here, at Baikal, it's happening right on land. We're sitting in the front row of this grand geological show. That's why the depth here is so extreme. The bottom of Baikal sinks faster than sand, and silt can fill it in. The rift is a bottomless abyss that leads toward Earth's mantle. And that's why there are so many anomalies here. Gas, oil, magnetic fields. This is the breath of the depths, coming frighteningly close to the surface. Baikal is not just a beautiful pearl of Siberia. It's a powerful tectonic pump that moves the planet's energy. And maybe one day it will become the cradle of new life in a new ocean. When humanity has long been gone, 13 mysteries, from a fish that melts in the sun to the rift that will tear a continent apart. Now, you understand why scientists look at Baikal not with tenderness, but with awe. Write in the comments which fact shocked you the most. Take care of yourself, and respect the stihia. See you soon.